Just before I go across to Gaurang, also have Vaibhav Agrawal who's joining me on the phone line. Vaibhav, let's start with SBI. How are you reading those numbers?
I think these are pretty positive set of numbers. Bottom line is also about 10% more than what we were expecting, and even on the asset quality, actually to have delivered an absolute decline in the gross and net NPA ratios sequentially. I think that's a pretty positive set of numbers, and they've been doing this since quite a few quarters now, in spite of the environment. So in that sense, that stability and asset quality is continuing for SBI, which is a positive sign.
Vaibhav, if I remember the timing of this right, about 3 quarters or so ago, we had heard from Arundhati Bhattacharya, who said within the next 2 to 3 quarters, they could definitely see an improvement as far as the asset quality goes. Do you think this is where the improvement has started coming in on asset quality, or do you expect that this is a one-off and they could continue seeing some more pressure as far as asset quality is concerned?
Well, lumpy NPAs can still not be ruled out, considering that some of the sectors like metals, etc., where even SBI does have a reasonably large exposure, they are still in trouble. But, considering the size of the overall bank, their ability to absorb and their overall profitability, the way they've been maintaining it, I think they're pretty well placed right now to absorb some of those lumpy accounts which may come in the next 1 or 2 quarters as well. And I think the overall trend for them, now for more than 2-3 quarters has been quite positive on the asset quality front.
Vaibhav, in terms of the exposure that we see of whether an SBI or a PNB, we've been talking of the entire discoms and what's happening there, speaking to some of the PSU banks. Do you think that's going to be a significant concern for counters like SBI going forward?
Well, if the, ultimately if a package does go through from a medium-term perspective, it's positive for the power sector and starts, resolving those problems in the sector. While probably in the near term, immediately if the interest rates do come down on those large exposures that PSU banks do have, so there would be a near term net interest income negative impact. But I think in the medium term, it would be a positive, considering that the huge exposures to the power sector, over a period of time, the outlook on that would also improve. So I think from a more medium term perspective, it would be positive once the deal goes through. It's just a short term negative on the net interest income front.
Okay, we also have Lancelot to understand, but my colleague Anupriya Nair is joining me on this conversation as well, and she has some questions for you, gentlemen.
All right, Vaibhav, I just want to say that SBI numbers are definitely looking quite solid at this point. Everyone's been talking about how this might be the peak of the NPA problem for the PSU banks, and we're starting to see that in the numbers, at least in PNB as well as SBI. Vaibhav, going into these earnings for SBI, what was your call on the stock? And do you think, considering now we're seeing a gross NPA number that's at least the lowest in the last 1.5 years, and my colleague Shraddha has been poring over the tables, do you think it will merit a re-rating?
Well, even in our view, so we had a buy on the stock before the results as well. This is one of the very few PSU banks where we had a buy, with a target price of 283, and I think we would more or less retain that target price. The stock is trading at, less than price to book, which is at the lower end at which SBI trades. It commands a premium to other PSU banks. While at present, if you actually see, we have a Bank of Baroda trading at almost 0.8, 0.85 and SBI at 0.9. So clearly for us, SBI is the better pick, considering numbers are also far more stable, and given its overall, structural positives as well, I think that is the one stock in the PSU space that we would actually recommend a buy on.
Okay, in fact, Anu, you've been looking very closely at this space in terms of what's happening on asset quality. You were just asking Vaibhav as well, as far as NPAs go. Are we seeing some bit of, NPAs being sort of peaking during this quarter? How would you really look at and read the numbers that we have?
Shraddha's been poring over those numbers, so now that she's been getting us from the PNB numbers as well as Union Bank. Bank of Baroda was the only hitch today, but you look at the overall numbers, it seems like the peak of the pace of the impairment is starting to come down. I think that's the big relief that even Vaibhav was talking about, something that the Moody's report also highlighted when they changed the outlook to stable, that there will be NPA formation. The problem is not over yet, but the pace of impairment formation is slowing down, and slowing down quite dramatically. Bank of Baroda as well as Union Bank both making a point to say that no 525 done this quarter as well. Bank of Baroda has a single problem with textile account fraud as well, which has resulted in a bit of pressure this quarter. But SBI, all in all, a rounded solid quarter. Vaibhav, if I can come back to you with PNB, and that's the stock that's up about almost 4% in trade. It was a written off stock 2 quarters ago. I remember Morgan Stanley saying it can halve from this point, it can go below 100 as well. Looking at the numbers and looking how the NPA fall has been starting to curtail out, do you think it deserves a relook?
Well, yeah, I mean, PNB is, the second stock which was sort of, on the verge for us. And we will again look at these numbers. The thing is that there are clearly some of these larger PSU banks which over the last 2 years or so, more than that, they've been consolidating. They've really slowed down their loan growth. So what they have on their books is a very seasoned loan book which has already seen a lot of pain over the last 2 years, and they've done very little incremental lending. And inevitably, slowly the NPAs are bound to start plateauing. While you have some few other PSU banks like Bank of India, IOB, etc., which had continued to go a little aggressive on their loan growth. For those set of PSU banks, the problems may still not be over. But yeah, for some of these others like SBI and PNB, I think, because their loan books are so seasoned and have already seen so much pain in the past, I think, some amount of plateauing is clearly being seen. And valuations again for PNB, for a large bank like PNB, are at a discount to its peers like Bank of Baroda. So, that is another interesting stock to look at in the PSU space.
Vaibhav, this seems like a bit of an odd question at front, but for the last 2 years, we've seen great asset quality pain in PSU banks. Some said that it's great news because they're cleaning up the books. This quarter round, starting off, we had a private bank such as Axis Bank doing a lumpy ARC sale, which has raised a lot of questions. What's really standard amongst these books in private banks? Do you think the asset quality pain could actually shift out? In fact, let's listen into what Jayant Sinha has to say on the economy right now.
As you know, one of the important objectives of eliminating exemptions and reducing corporate tax rates is in fact to reduce litigation overall, and so that is absolutely our effort. The other thing that we have underway is simplification of the tax code. As you know, there's a committee that's been established to actually go through the tax code and to see where indeed there are ambiguities or matters that are not clear in terms of interpretation, and by doing that we will of course reduce litigation as well. So whether it is through cleaning up and streamlining exemptions, whether it is simplifying the tax code, we are absolutely trying to reduce the amount of litigation that is in the system right now. You also heard the Honorable Prime Minister say today that we are going to change the appraisal system for our tax officers so that their assessments in the first instance are much more accurate and are not inflated in any way. That itself will also reduce a lot of anxiety and a lot of litigation and appeals in the system. So overall, as we've always said, our goal is to be able to ensure that our tax system is fair, it's simple, it's predictable. And those are the general principles that we are following. Now, in addition to that, of course, there are specific cases that are sub judice right now. Our endeavor with respect to all these specific cases is always that we will attempt in good faith to try and settle them, and that remains our consistent principle for these specific cases.
So in this context, then are we actually looking at the retro part of the the Income Tax Act? Also, are we looking at it internally within the government, or as you're saying that we open on other options? So I mean, how do we see this panning out?
Again, as I've said, we can't speak to the specific cases. Each of them is sub judice. Each of them is going through different processes in terms of either appeal, discussions with respect to various honorable courts. So we can't speak to specific cases. I can tell you what our general principles are.
Okay. And so
all right, that's Jayant Sinha speaking about the committee that's been established to really go to the tax code and saying the effort and the commitment is to really try and bring down the litigation in the system. Before I go back to both Vaibhav as well as Lancelot, just to mention of Bosch's numbers that are coming out as we speak, a profit coming in at 305 versus 306 crores. The stock is taking a bit of a knock, over 1% lower, sales at 2597 crores. You have operating margin that's at 17.26. So that's the headline coming in on Bosch. The stock is under pressure. Gentlemen, let me come back to you. And Vaibhav, what's your call on an SBI as well as PNB, and what would your top picks be from this space?
So within the PSU pack right now, SBI is our preferred pick. We have a buy with a target price of 283. On PNB, we are still having a neutral rating. Even PNB is going through a management transition, and we would wait for some more clarity and some more indications on what the outlook could be, whether this recent 1 or 2 quarters of stability, can it sustain? But yeah, that would be one of the other stocks on our radar. Other than that, actually, I mean, whether it be a Bank of Baroda or some of the other PSUs as well, we still, sort of have a cautious view and would not yet sort of be looking at investing in those stocks.
Okay, Lancelot, the same question to you. Now that we've got these numbers and now that you're seeing that improvement coming in as far as the asset quality goes, or what call would you have on these stocks?
Well, I think this improvement is a good sign for SBI and as well as for PNB. Although we need to probably see that the improvement continues, because sometimes you could have one quarter showing some signs of improvement. So it's important to understand from the management whether they see this improvement continuing or sustaining, going ahead. And that would be a key issue to watch out for. However, from valuation perspective, I think both banks have, really come off significantly from their highs and are trading well below their historical price to book valuations. So from an valuation perspective, yes, it does seem to be an opportunity to look to accumulate these stocks over a period of time.
All right, Vaibhav, as well as Lancelot, thanks for joining us. Those are the numbers. And as we take a break, a quick mention on what's happening in the Nifty. It's absolutely muted right now, swinging between, in fact, gains and losses. Has lost the 8,000 mark, 7,954 on the Nifty. Take a break, much more on the other side, including continuing to decode all the earnings we've got just now.